Okay, hello, and welcome to A Paratrooper and a Yogi Walk Into a Bar. As every week, every Monday, we're here. Shana is in LA. I'm here. She's the Yogi. I'm the former paratrooper. And we talk about the Middle East.
Yes. So a paratrooper and a yogi walk into a bar. The paratrooper says to the yogi, you know what? When I drink this magic drink, it actually makes me fly. No, levitate. The yogi can't believe it. There's no such thing as levitation. Everybody knows this. The paratrooper says to the bartender, give me one of those magic drinks. He gives him the shot. The guy drinks it, goes outside. The girl follows. Paratrooper climbs up to the top of the building. No parachute. Jumps off. 5 minutes. He sits in the air in lotus pose. No strings, no parachute, no nothing. The yogi can't believe her eyes. Finally, he dives down to the floor, landing in a one-finger handstand, which is also pretty remarkable in and of itself. She is beside herself. They go back inside. She's like, I have to try this. I have to try this magic drink. And she says, bartender, give me some of that magic water. And he's like, yeah, I don't think that's such a good idea. She says, I'm a paying customer. Give it to me. He gives her a glass of the water. She drinks it. They go outside. She climbs to the top of the building, jumps off, lands on the ground, dies. Bartender says to the paratrooper, Superman, you're a real asshole when you're drunk.
Well, nobody's going to die here, so that's the important thing to note. That was
Yeah.
terrible. That was terrible.
Just make sure you bring your parachute and allow me to introduce our resident superhero, the mensch with the most, Andrew Fox. And that's Mr. Andrew Fox on Substack and X.
Thank you. Well, I think it's my turn to go first tonight. And I'm
Yes.
going to take it right away from Jake's because I'm talking about Hamas. Um, and more specifically, I'm talking about the absence of Hamas. Because I think aside from hostage negotiations, they've been almost entirely absent from any commentary on this war at all. Starting on even the 8th of October, when the denial and the obfuscation started about what they'd actually done. And I don't know if you saw it, but Brianna Wu's in Israel at the moment, and she saw the 40, I think it's 49 minutes now, they've expanded it. She saw that video of the atrocities, and her reaction was pretty much exactly the same as all the people that I've seen see that video. It's just shock, disbelief, horror, um, and choking up when you talk about it. Now, I've been unfortunate enough to see evidence above and beyond that video in Israel, and I can't talk about it without choking up. But this is completely forgotten about by the world. There's a really good reason that Israel is fighting in Gaza, and it's because of what they did on 7th of October. And no country in the world would do differently to what Israel's doing if you had that on your doorstep. But what about the innocents in Gaza? I think they are obviously in the forefront of world commentary, and to a degree, rightly so, because war inevitably comes with misery and suffering for innocents. This is a built-in feature rather than a bug of armed conflict. But there's also an element to that debate that's missing as well. And it's that the reason that civilians are dying in the numbers that they are, and there are a good number of dead civilians in Gaza, and we shouldn't pretend that there aren't, but it's because Hamas is forcing them into harm's way through their very specific human shield strategy. Now, I've got a report coming out next week on this, actually, where we identify the 10 ways in which Hamas has deliberately weaponized the civilian landscape of Gaza. Um, but that narrative is missing. It's missing from the ICJ reporting. It's missing from the reports of things like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch and all the other reports. They barely mention Hamas. And what we've done is we've gone back over the years and we found statement after statement from Hamas's leaders openly talking about their human sacrifice strategy. And what we've done is go back years and we found quote after quote from Hamas's leadership boasting about how the people of Gaza are a sacrifice and how they're all dying for martyrdom and for the cause. Um, We've gone into how they've dug the tunnels. We've got evidence, all open source, of how they have used hospitals and schools and mosques and children's bedrooms. It's all out there, and yet it's completely missing from commentary on this war. I just think that's a really striking aspect. You know, the IDF has been fighting in Gaza. They've had 3,000 wounded and killed. You know, that doesn't happen through shaving cuts or poor hygiene. That's from combat. You go to a rehab center in Israel and you can see all the young men and women missing limbs from the IED threat that's in there. You interview IDF soldiers and they will tell you about the IED threats they faced and the ambushes and the anti-tank missiles. And indeed, we've had a couple of Israelis killed in just the last 48 hours in Gaza. Like, this is a hard fight for them. And yet, to look at the world's reporting of this conflict, you think it was just Israeli missiles getting lobbed at random into Gaza to see who they could kill. And what do you do about that? Well, I think what you do is what we're trying to do, and that is you try and drag Hamas back into the spotlight. Yes, the Israelis have made mistakes in Gaza. Yes, some Israelis will have crossed the line of the law of armed conflict and will have committed crimes. That's what happens in war. That's why we have war crimes legislation and law. But the biggest war crime of all is what Hamas has done to the people of Gaza, and that is never, ever mentioned. So I think it's time we drag that back into the mainstream conversation and start holding Hamas accountable. Because if we don't, what we're doing is validating a human shield strategy. We're showing every malign actor in the Middle East and elsewhere that human shields work. If you use human shields, your enemy will be condemned for firing, will be, even no matter how much they try to adhere to the law of armed conflict, they will be condemned for it. And strategically, narratively, they will lose that aspect of the conflict. And that is not the lesson, I don't think, that we want anyone to take forward from the Gaza war.
Why do you think the NGOs in particular that are supposed to be like the good guys in the world, why do you think that they so deliberately leave Hamas out of the narrative?
I think there's two reasons. First of all, being anti-Israel is financially very lucrative. It always makes me laugh on X when people accuse me of being paid by the Israelis. I haven't yet seen a single shekel. So if anyone from Mossad is watching, payments are overdue. But if I really wanted to make money, I'd go into the anti-Israel side of things because there's so many more people out there that are anti-Israel. And it's a very, very lucrative source of funding for a lot of people. The second reason is because there is an entrenched anti-Israel sentiment in these organizations. They have a certain worldview where you have oppressor and oppressed. And unfortunately, since 1967, really, when Israel stopped being the underdog, since then, it's been very much that the Israelis are the oppressors in this worldview, and poor Palestinians are the oppressed, and they get a free pass on the terrorism that's carried out, on the attacks in Israel, the intifadas. They just get brushed over because there's that oppressor oppressed narrative, and I think it ties very deeply into that particular worldview.
And something that's also interesting is by putting higher moral standards on Israel than any other country on earth is to validate the fact that Israel has a moral standard that is unrivaled, certainly matched by certain great nations, but unrivaled in the world. You can't hold morality against an immoral nation. They wouldn't care.
Yeah, and you know that you wouldn't put ground troops in if you were just trying to kill civilians. It'd be a stupid thing to do. You don't go through the pretense of fighting a war if you just want to kill innocents. It just makes no logical sense whatsoever. Um, so yeah, it's a double standard, and that is a feature of anti-Semitism as well, holding Jews to a higher standard or a different standard to anyone else. It's straight up one of the definitions of anti-Semitism. So that is clearly a factor.
Yeah, it truly is. And it's also so disappointing. I could tell you that with Yoga Athletica, before this war, I used to do like a monthly fundraiser every single month for a different cause, whether it was like an earthquake in Turkey or, it doesn't matter, saving animals in Ukraine during the war or whatever it was. And every month I would try to find an NGO that was not explicitly anti-Israel. And we're talking about across the board. And it's almost impossible to find. Every once in a while, you could find someone who's neutral on Israel. But there's definitely an agenda that that also aligns with what's going on in UN and the various criminal courts, international courts.
So, what are you going to talk about today, Shana?
So yesterday I talked about the folly of negotiating with Iran, and today I would like to talk about the folly of negotiating with Hamas. And armchair diplomat that I am, because I know so much more than Steve Witkoff, I feel like I'm very well positioned to talk about this. I just want to start out by putting aside the fact that we need to stop validating terrorists by even giving them a seat at the table. I mean, there's that, like rule number one, don't negotiate with terrorists. Okay, but we're going to put that aside because we're negotiating with terrorists. One thing that I've been thinking about, particularly this last week, is that so many people say that the Israeli war aims of getting the hostages back, dismantling Hamas, and securing the borders are at odds with each other. And for sure, this is something that I've been repeating just like everybody else. But one thing, and it ties into what you're saying about human shields, is that Hamas actually has a tremendous interest in protecting the lives of the hostages. They are their only bargaining chips, and really their most effective human shields. We're seeing that they are going out of their way to save hostages, because that is the only way that they can maintain any sort of power right now. So if the hostages were to be killed either by Hamas or even by friendly fire, it means open season for Israel to destroy the terror tunnel network and to destroy Hamas, like no holds barred. So I'm seeing a lot more nuance in the execution of this war and how multiple aims actually can be reached. And I feel like Israel is making some very interesting choices. But before I get into that, I think that every time I see a new headline about like another hostage deal on the table, and it's like, you could have them all if you just leave and end the war. And I've come to call this like premature evacuation. It's like retreat right now would be a total waste of all the efforts, the money, and quite frankly, the lives that have been lost in this process. The whole point of a maximum pressure campaign is to apply maximum pressure. And if we just keep pulling back, it's like the all hell that has been promised is like, funny, not funny, it's just dribs and drabs of hell. Like, we need to go in and do the good old fashioned thing that used to be called winning a war. Like, hands up, white flag, like the whole Megillah. Like, we need Hamas to give up. We can't go to negotiations the minute our pressure campaign starts working. Now, we talk about negotiating in good faith, and on the pro-Israel side, we'll keep saying, oh, Hamas is not negotiating in good faith. They can't stay in power. These are ridiculous things that they're offering. But at the same time, I'm starting to wonder if Israel is deliberately also not negotiating in good faith so much as showing up to the table because the hostage families demand it. I think that Israel is finally getting smart, and maybe like my nervousness when I see these bad hostage deals is more just like, oh, are they going to? And they don't. But you can't give up the pressure as soon as your pressure starts working. right? We need to apply pressure until Hamas literally comes begging for mercy. And also, very significantly, is the fact that the Gazans are uprising now. And they're realizing, or maybe they've already realized, but getting more emboldened to speak up against Hamas. And we need them, I think, to overthrow. The problem is that every deal we have negotiated with Hamas, no matter how strong our upper hand, has been a bad deal since the beginning of time. Like, we just fold. But if this is truly going to be the last Gaza war, we cannot back off again. Israel should be dictating the terms, not negotiating them. That means all 59 hostages released and complete disarmament and capitulation. No aid, no retreat. We need Hamas to cede control and allow their people to live. And it's interesting because I'm sure you saw the reports, but either yesterday or the day before, there was a report that said that 3 Hamas officials have already agreed to all 59 being released and a willingness to disarm in exchange for a 5-year ceasefire. Now, let's put that piece aside. It's the first time that we're seeing some like serious cracks, I think, in the armor, where Hamas is saying, okay, if we're even gonna like live, forget about running the place. If we're gonna live, it's time that we need to start making some serious concessions, because ultimately, we all know Hamas does not care about its people. It doesn't care if they starve. It doesn't care if they die. In fact, these things are the good things for them. But now that they don't have aid to steal, for example, now that they can't make their own payroll, now it's personal, right? Of course, we've got the Hamas leaders who are still living abroad as billionaires like kings. But again, there's a lot of stuff you have to like sort of put aside in these discussions. That being said, I was so upset to hear that Israel is considering bringing aid back. But at the same time, I have to maintain that time and time again, Israeli ingenuity has saved the day in the end. Now, I actually heard this on a podcast this morning, and it dropped my jaw. I'm sure you already know this, but what they said was this, because I was really upset about, oh, we're going to give them back aid, and now, whatever happens, it's going to wind up in Hamas's hands again. They're going to use that money when they resell it to feed their war machine. But what these analysts, I think it was at FDD, said was that by the Israeli plan, the new plan to deliver the aid themselves from areas that they are in complete control of, the only way the populace will be able to get the food and medicine that they need will be to leave the Hamas camp and go over to Israeli-controlled areas. This blew my mind, because now we're giving the aid, and at the same time, we are defanging Hamas. We are taking the control of the population away from them. Ultimately, Israel does not owe it to Hamas to give them the aid that they steal and use to fuel the missiles and the weaponry that they use to destroy Israel. No one, under any circumstance, no nation is responsible for funding their own enemy who uses that aid to defeat them.
Yeah, and it's a curious question as to why now, because this seems to be something that perhaps could have been done 18 months ago. And I think it is a change in direction in the White House. I think that's the bottom line. I think there was a reluctance on the Israeli side. They weren't super keen on that responsibility, but now that Mr. Trump has essentially taken their handbrakes off the IDF, I think it makes perfectly logical sense to me for them to control the aid because for the exact reasons that you say. Um, Concerns about that, first of all, making sure that enough people get fed. Um, Israel doesn't want to, whilst the eyes of the world might not think they have a moral high ground, Israel doesn't want to be untrue to itself and be responsible for innocents starving to death. That's very important, I think, for the Israelis. Um, but yeah, it's very much the case that they need to protect themselves as well and make sure they don't become targets as they're distributing aid. That's going to be the other tricky thing to do. But the IDF's got this. I think Hamas hasn't been able to mass any force for a very long time. They've been entirely reliant on guerrilla raids and ambushes. Um, and that doesn't lend itself perhaps to attacks on aid distribution. So, as the plan goes, I think it's a sensible step forward.
Yeah. And as much as I do, as much as I don't like using the populace as pawns, there's also the element of the more the Gazans feel like they're suffering, the more they're also going to revolt. Ultimately, I do think we're at an inflection point right now. And if we maintain the maximum pressure, I think that the Gazans, first of all, would be very, very happy to leave Gaza and relocate per the Trump plan. Probably at least half of them would beg to get out. And I think that the more that we can separate the people of Gaza from the people of Hamas, the easier this war is going to be to finally finish.
Yeah, completely. And that's just classic counterinsurgency. Separating the insurgents from the population is classic stuff. The Israelis are just doing it a new way, which is interesting. In and of itself, there's definitely books to be written on this in future.
I'm sure that you'll be the one to write them.
Yeah, I'm on it. Um, but yeah, that I think that brings us to a close quite nicely. Please do like, subscribe, comment below. Let us know what you think. Let us know if you agree or if you disagree. We're always here to have a good-natured debate. If you can drop your comments below.
Absolutely. And thanks to everybody for showing up. Please also share on social. Let's get the word out. And Am Yisrael Chai.
Cheers to
L'chaim.
that.